Supreme Court justices who ruled against this the policy, striking it down, are they still invited to your State of the Union next week? And will you speak with them?
They are invited, barely. Barely. 3 are happily invited. No, they're barely invited. Honestly, I couldn't care less if they come. Okay.
I want us to talk about the Supreme Court and the tariffs, right? So, Supreme Court strikes down tariffs.
Can I summarize it in just a few words? It's interesting what you get with this, because the Supreme Court, through Roberts, did not say he can't do something else. It just says, since you're talking tariffs, that's in effect the tax. Now, it's left wide open,
right,
for Trump to go after the same targets with an embargo, or, let me read the thing, and it speaks for itself.
Yeah, because it says here, Roberts' court shuts door on tariffs but leaves room for Trump to prevail.
Yeah, but the bottom line is, it may have been a brilliant tactical move by Trump to get this particular Supreme Court to go against him, because it leaves draconian methods open. For example, let's say that you want to bring in 10 tons of steel, or 100 or 1,000 tons of steel, and import them. You pay so much per ton as a tariff. The Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. But what the Supreme Court, even in Roberts' opinion, says you can do is Trump can say, okay, I can establish an embargo. You can't bring in any steel from that location, or I can set a quota. You can't bring in 100 tons of steel, but you can bring in 10. Right. So it leaves it,
So it
some
says
people would like to pay a little tariff on it rather than being totally banned from bringing it in, which is an embargo, or subject to a quota, you can only bring this much in.
So it says the U.S. Supreme Court may have struck down President Donald Trump's tariffs, but the fight is far from finished. While the court closed one legal door, it left several others wide open, and the president has already signaled that he intends to step through them. On Friday, last Friday, the Supreme Court issued its much anticipated decision in Learning Resources, Inc. versus Trump, a case about whether the International Emergency Economic Powers Act authorizes the president to impose the challenge import tariffs. In a 6-3 opinion written by Chief Justice John Roberts, the court held that IEEPA does not grant the president authority to impose tariffs. The ruling struck down the tariffs at issue in the case. Importantly, however, the court did not hold that the president lacks tariff authority altogether. Rather, it concluded only that IEEPA is not a valid statutory foundation for such measures. The opinion left intact the president's ability to rely on other trade statutes enacted by Congress. It goes on to say, distinct roadmap. Justice Kavanaugh underscored that limitations in his principled dissent, and in doing so, he sketched a roadmap for future presidential actions. Although I firmly disagree with the court's holding today, the decision might not substantially constrain a president's ability to order tariffs going forward. That is because numerous other federal statutes authorize the president to impose tariffs and might justify most, if not all, of the tariffs issued in this case. He pointed specifically to a Trade Expansion Act of 1962, Trade Act of 1974, and Tariff Act of 1930. So The president announced his next move.
Justice Thomas said so brilliantly and eloquently, the language of the statute is clear. Under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the president has the authority to regulate foreign trade. And going back to the founding of our country, the term regulate has always meant and included the power to levy duties. But here's the good news, Laura. As cowardly, as horrendous as the Supreme Court ruling was, as poorly as it reflects on John Roberts' court and the continued torturing of our statutes and our Constitution, here's the good news. The court also affirmed the president has the authority under Section 301, Section 232, Section 122, Section 338, and many other provisions of federal law that the president can levy tariffs on foreign nations. So his program will not only be fully reconstituted, but it will be expanded. And one more point, Laura. The Supreme Court also affirmed that under IEPA, the president has authority to restrict, impede, deny, license, or even fully embargo any foreign trade. So the net result of all this is we're going to keep and grow the tariffs to bring back American manufacturing, which keeps prices low by incentivizing products to be made here in America. But it also means that President Trump has even more tools when it comes to dealing with foreign countries that undermine our security.
Bipartisan criticism
No, not bipartisan.
of the tariffs.
Excuse me.
There's several
A few
Republicans
people.
have said that.
Yeah,
But
a
why
few people.
wouldn't you just work with Congress to come up with a plan?
I don't have to.
push tariffs
I have the
through?
right to do tariffs, and I've always had the right to do tariffs, and it's all been approved by Congress, so there's no reason to do it. All we're doing is we're going through a little bit more complicated process, not complicated very much, but a little more complicated than what we had. We'll be able to take in tariffs, more tariffs, and the Congress people and the Congress.
Down the Canadian tariffs last week.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
been votes
you
in the
know why?
Senate against it.
Yeah, because we lost 2 Republicans or 3 Republicans because they're not good Republicans. What you don't, which have also been confirmed and are fully allowed. Therefore, effective immediately, all national security tariffs under Section 232 and existing Section 301 tariffs, they're existing, they're there, remain in place, fully in place, and in full force and effect. Today, I will sign an order to impose a 10% global tariff under Section 122, over and above our normal tariffs already being charged. And we're also initiating several Section 301 and other investigations to protect our country from unfair trading practices of other countries and companies.
Justices Gorsuch and Barrett, are you surprised in particular by their decision today?
I am.
And do you regret nominating them?
I don't want to say whether or not I regret. I think their decision was terrible. Yeah. I think it's an embarrassment to their families. You want to know the truth? The 2 of them. Yeah.
Okay, so now Trump's next move, he says, today I will sign an order to impose 10% global tariffs under Section 122 over and above our normal tariffs already being charged. And we are also initiating several Section 301 and other investigations to protect our country from unfair trading practices. The message was unmistakable. The court's ruling will not mark the end of the administrative tariff strategy.
And look, I've told people, there's a principle of law and legislation. What you can't do through one door, you can do through the other one. Imagine the whole process as a house. Most houses have a front door and a back door. If you have to go around the back door because you can't go in the front, you just have to go through more stages. That's all this is right here. Even Roberts admitted that Trump is not cut off. He just can't do it the particular way he did. So these particular statutes, those are allowances that Congress put in long time ago that allowed the chief diplomat of the United States, as per the Constitution, to do these things. Now, it's just, there's nothing they can do about it. And there's one other thing he can do, which is, as chief diplomat, he can authorize, can negotiate a treaty. And the treaty is submitted to the Senate, not the House and the Senate, just the Senate, where the Republicans hold the majority. And if it is ratified by the Senate, what winds up happening is, guess what? It becomes part of the supreme law of the land.
And this is what he wrote on Truth Social. Based on a thorough, detailed, and complete review of the ridiculous, poorly written, and extraordinarily anti-American decision on tariffs issued yesterday, after many months of contemplation by the United States Supreme Court, please let this statement serve to represent that I, as President of the United States of America, will be effective immediately raising the 10% worldwide tariffs on countries, many of which have been ripping the U.S. off for decades without retribution until I came along, to the fully allowed and legally tested 15% level. During the next short number of months, the Trump administration, will determine and issue the new and legally permissible tariffs, which will continue our extraordinarily successful process of making America great again, greater than ever before. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump.
That's what I mean when I say that, in a way, the line from the administration seems to be that nothing has changed today. It's not that the tariffs haven't been used to control fentanyl or to control trade with China, but rather, when I've listened to you speak so far today and the president, that you will immediately institute these tariffs, continue these tariffs through different mechanisms. You can, through, I believe it's Section 122, immediately extend these tariffs for 5 months. And in the meantime, then launch investigations to extend these tariffs further under other sections of these trade acts.
Exactly. And the durability of the Section 232, Section 301s, which are already in effect, and the Commerce and USTR will launch additional investigations into additional deficiencies. Those will take 30, 60, 90 days, but within 3 days, the president can put on the Section 122 10% global tariff. So at Treasury, for the full year 2026, we foresee the no decrease in revenue. But again, it's the instantaneous power that the president has. But now that he's going to have to, if he wants to negotiate with these countries, he does have the right to say, I can embargo all your products. We just can't collect $1 from the embargo.
But why?
What this is about, very briefly, is that the United States for decades had very high tariffs that guaranteed that the American worker would be employed and would get a heavy, large, reasonable, and lucrative wage for what he did. At the end of World War II, the United States came out of it in an unprecedented fashion, way on top of the rest of the world when it came to manufacturing capacity and technology. Europe was devastated, so was Asia. So we came up with various plans, the Marshall Plan for Europe, what MacArthur did for Japan, acting as shogun. All right, over there, General Marshall, General MacArthur. Congress passed some changes in our tariff situation to give Europe and Asia a break so they could be restored as markets for the industrial capacity of the United States. It worked. But what happened is it did not get ended once it had worked, and some smart people were able to take advantage of the loopholes that came about from these tariff reductions or eliminations. And the Democratic Party, when it was in office, passed legislation that helped them out. It was trying to gain the favor of heavy industry and high finance and business. So what happens is cunning, I wouldn't say smart in the long term, businesses decided to take their operations abroad where their cost would be much lower. They could sell the product for the same thing and get bigger profits, but that put the American worker out of work. that reduced his wages, that increased inflation, and that diminished the capacity of the United States to maintain its lead as the number one producer of industrial goods. Now that is possessed by the People's Republic of China, which has around 82% of the industrial capacity of the whole world, thanks to these ill-advised policies. So it's causing us to go downhill. Unemployment is down, inflation is high, and the tariffs will have some immediate impact on the increase in cost, but they also provide a market opportunity for America to get back into the business of manufacturing its own consumable goods. So that's a good thing.